Well, let's get started. I hope you've really enjoyed the conference today. I think it's been pretty wonderful. So I think personally that it's amazing to see the things that are changing, and that thank you so much to all of our speakers and everything that's been going on. I want to stand back a little bit and take a quick look at what's happened over the last 12 months, and purely in the sort of perspective of the CNCF landscape. There's been quite a big change. From Linkadee's perspective, it's been going from strength to strength. If you look at the kind of the GitHub stars as a measure of popularity, these things have doubled since donation in 2019. Kuma from the Kong team has been donated to the CNCF, and Microsoft have just released Open Service Mesh and are working towards a donation. We've got the wonderful works at Solo, who've been pushing the technical boundaries of WebAssembly and Service Mesh Federation. Layer 5, who are driving compliance and performance testing with Meshery. Network Service Mesh, which is taking care of all of the Layer 2 and Layer 3 needs. The Hamlet specification from VMware team, which is looking at the ways that different vendors can integrate their service meshes. And of course, let's not forget Spiffy, which is driving and defining a lot of the identification standards inside of Service Mesh, and the wonderful Envoy, which I'm really, really pleased to see part of the CNCF landscape. The CNCF also has two formal working groups. We have the Service Mesh Interface, which is attempting to rationalize the way that you integrate with Service Mesh, and also the Service Mesh Working Group and Service Mesh Performance. The latter is looking at how you can kind of create a universal performance index for your Service Mesh. Future of Service Mesh is looking really bright. There are so many wonderful people getting together and collaborating in this space. I apologize if I left anybody out from the previous projects. I know there are so many of you, and thank you all. Continue to do what you're doing. You are really helping. Now, there's a reason behind all of this. Why are we so interested in Service Mesh? I think we've got to look at the root cause of distributed systems. Now, distributed systems development has been growing year on year. And it's growing because systems are, well, they're becoming more complex. They need to be more essential. They need higher availability, and developers need to kind of be able to develop and change faster. The reason behind this is that we kind of have to be looking at replatforming and thinking about the ways that we're working. From the CNCF survey, we can see that folks are finding challenges with this. The annual report summarizes and kind of like picking out some of those things. You can see that security, observability, connectivity, reliability, these are the things which folks are finding problem with. And I think one of the main reasons for this is the patterns you use for developing distributed systems are different from the way that you develop more monolithic systems. You move things from an in-process call to more of an over-the-network call. This in itself is a huge shift, but it's an even bigger shift when you realize that the network is maybe not as fast or as stable as you originally thought. But Service Mesh is helping, and 47% of users who surveyed in evaluating Service Mesh are kind of looking towards it as an answer. I think Service Mesh provides an essential layer for any platform. It kind of allows you to concentrate on business value and let the platform do a heavy lifting. But why is it that Service Mesh, whilst covering these complexities, is maybe not on parity with a deployment such as Kubernetes? I think we can look at a quote from one of the world's most eminent industrialists when he was asked about Service Mesh. And Henry Ford said that if he'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And okay, fair enough. It's okay to be flippant and snarky about new technologies, but it takes time for them to be understood. It's a huge undertaking. Before folks can find a solution, they need to understand the problem. And I'm really enthused that today we've had some wonderful folks sharing their knowledge and helping with that journey. Let's have a quick recap on what we've learned. So we started out the day with the lightning talks, and straight into it, Stefan was talking about Flagger. Now, canary deployments as a pattern are a wonderful way to progressively introduce a new version of your software in production, but it's not so easy to use. Now, where Flagger helps is that it takes the heavy lifting away. It automates and implements a lot of this process. John from Equinix talks about a problem which is quite more and more commonplace. How does Service Mesh in a multi-cluster environment? How do you do disaster recovery in that context? And kind of continuing on that theme, you've multi-cluster and Service Mesh. Marco introduced Kuma and why it was built as a kind of an Envoy first, but predominantly solving sort of enterprise and heterogeneous problems. Manuel from Continuous closed out the lightning talks and explained the architecture of Service Mesh. I think this is something essential that we need to understand as developers. We're going to encounter certain problems when it comes to debugging, and sort of understanding the Service Mesh will help us to write better code and get to the root of those problems quicker. Into the main talks, Lin and William talked about managing the complexities of Service Mesh and actually the effect it has on the humans who are interacting and implementing them. And Louise and Steve talked about the Istio project. They acknowledged the complexities of maintaining an Istio installation and how migrating to a new architecture made it operationally simpler. This is kind of a big deal, and back to kind of Lin and William's talk, Service Mesh solves problems, but it adds its own with complexity. Simplicity, which helps the operator, is a very, very positive thing, and great work for the Istio team for listening to user feedback and making these changes. Mandar and John talked to us about how Istio has embraced a pluggable architecture using WebAssembly. WebAssembly plugins allow custom logic to be injected into the Envoy proxy request flow. And this is super useful for observability, but I'm really excited to see where this goes. I think authorization and other security plugins could be a great benefit to Service Mesh consumers. Great talk from Carol and Risha about the work on Dive and their dog fooding of the latest Linkerd versions and how it's helping to make the product better. Christian eloquently set the scene for why multi-cluster and why multi-mesh is needed. It's a lot to kind of take in, but there's a lot of very positive movement in this space from folks like Solo. Many organizations operate multi-cluster, and the industry is reacting to the need to connect multiple clusters, potentially from different vendors. Christian also explained some depth into these patterns, and I hope it gave you some inspiration and insight onto what Service Mesh can do for your organization. Amazingly super cool presentation from Patrick, talking about how Autodesk implemented Istio with zero downtime. I think success stories like this are a wonderful contribution to community knowledge. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing. So if we look at the reason behind adoption as a lack of information and knowledge, then I think today we've made some amazing inroads into sharing some of that knowledge. But we're not there yet. When we look at the 2020 report, I'm sure we're going to see an increase in the adoption and production usages, but that growth is reliant on you. We need all of you wonderful people to be sharing your stories, to be contributing to the open source projects inside of the CNCF and driving forward adoption of Service Mesh. If you're evaluating Service Mesh, then we hope today it's gone down a long way to help you with those decisions. So thank you again. Thank you to our wonderful organizers, to our speakers, and of course you, the audience. Without you, none of this would be possible. We very much hope to see you again next time. But for now, please enjoy the rest of your KubeCon. And I'll be just over in the CNCF Slack if you've any questions, as all the speakers are. But thank you again, and goodbye.